Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning and welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad that you've joined us this morning for our continuing conversation about matters of faith that impact us as people here in the greater Joplin area. Today is May 22nd, which is a date that still kind of rocks everybody in the Joplin world because it was 5 years ago today that we experienced the F5 tornado that hit our area and kind of changed our world kind of forever. And that more so for some people than for others. But things have been very different in the last 5 years. My guest this morning is Aaron Brown, who's the pastor over at St. Paul's Methodist Church. And so, Aaron, it's good that you joined us today.
Thank you.
I know your life is very different since that point in time as well. But some things are the same, some things are different. It's all in its own spot. But we are going to talk about what it's like to be on the opposite side of that right after we come back, right after this Mercy Minute. So please stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Angie Separito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Jeff Manley. Dr. Manley, what do you do here?
OBGYN physician.
All right, and your office is located where?
We're in the hospital clinic complex, I guess, if you will, and it's on the 5th floor, just right down from labor and delivery.
So it's convenient to be down the hall from labor and delivery, but also what are the benefits of that?
Well, being in the same place makes it just safer for our babies, safer for our moms, because the physician's always in the same building, just a few steps down the hallway.
And our labor and delivery rooms, they labor, deliver everything in the same room.
It's nice, yeah. They are able to labor, deliver, and their postpartum recovery is all in the same room. There's room there for family and to stay the night as well. So everybody gets to stay in the same place, which is a nice added benefit.
Right across the hall from our NICU.
It's just right across the hall from the NICU.
And you're accepting new patients. If you'd like to make an appointment, you can call the number on your screen or visit mercy.net for more information.
Welcome back. Our guest this morning is Aaron Brown, and as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about being at the 5th anniversary period of being post-tornado, on the other side of the tornado.
Right.
And so thanks for joining me. Part of what I kind of wanted to do this morning, and we can see where this goes, but part of what I wanted to do was, sometimes I think we get ourselves locked in what was. We're not where we were 5 years ago. Now, of course, we had our initial reactions, 5 years ago, but we're in a very different place 5 years later. And I'd like to talk to, if we're going to use Christian terminology, I'd like to talk about what it is to be post-resurrection, rather than being in the middle of the suffering of the cross, which is where we were 5 years ago today.
Right. Well, I can't help but remember it. When every anniversary of the tornado rolls around, I think most of us go there, and the sights, the smells, the experiences, and for me, it was getting the call that something had happened. And of course, when all that happened, I'm in the basement with my family, kind of weathering it out, going upstairs to look outside, see what's going on, not be able to see anything, and heading into town. And as I got, we live south of town. As I got closer, it was pretty clear. Oh my gosh, something horrific has happened here. So I drove as far as I could, and thought, well, I'm just going to get to the nearest person I know. So as a friend of mine, I got to his house, and he and his family were standing outside their house. And so again, not knowing exactly what to do, but to say, okay, all these houses around here are just in shambles. What do? You start looking for people, you start looking for folks. So I just began to go house to house. At one point, my cell phone rang, said, Aaron, they're needing in the church to open it up for a triage center. So I was walking at that point, and I was probably 5 blocks from the church. So I ended up walking up to the church, and along the way, I'm meeting people. I think I walked up Winfield Street toward our church and asking folks as I encountered them, are you okay? Are your neighbors accounted for?
Right.
And that's the question I remember asking over and over, and made my way to the church. And by that time, they had already it was already opened up because our building was, half destroyed and the rest damaged. So it was already opened up, and people from the neighborhood were making their way there. Some medical personnel had arrived and started to triage people and use our classrooms for doing medical procedures, setting bones and getting people where they needed to be, and wounds sutured. So at that point, I began to run with people again. I knew things were handled, so I began to go look and run with folks. And one of the, I think I was walking down Oliver Street, just again asking people if they needed help and if their neighbors were accounted for. And I brought this hammer with me because I found this hammer in the middle of the street. And there was just this moment like, okay, there's a hammer sitting in the middle of the street, and the thought occurred, I might need that at some point. So I felt like I was stealing. I thought, oh my gosh, this is not my hammer. But and if anybody sees this and wants their hammer back, I'd gladly give it back to you. But well, not gladly, because it's kind of a part of my story. But I think it is also symbolic of in the middle of the chaos of that day, there was the seed of a new beginning, of resurrection and rebuilding. And I just, for that day, that night, spending all that day, all that night, helping people, digging people out at the church, working the triage, helping people to have water. And we had people that showed up with generators. We had no power, of course. Right. And then to get people moved from there to the more permanent places that were around, because we were so damaged.
Right, and ours was a different adventure that night. We were 10 blocks out of the strike zone, okay? But we were one of the places where when Memorial got slammed, I was getting ready to go over to Memorial. We were actually in the basement of the church getting ready for, taking cover. We were supposed to have a 6 o'clock service like we do every Sunday night. And, all of a sudden, it's just like, you start to hear the sirens. And of course, I'm with my new associate who's been here from India for, 2 weeks. And is going, what is a tornado, Father? And I'm like, I'll tell you when we get downstairs. It's one of those things. So, we got one tree branch down on the property. But, when Memorial got slammed, after I'd done a quick, service for the folks who remained, when I came out of that service, I thought that the tornado would hit over on Rangeline, and it was like a typical tornado. Yeah. Typical tornado. Boom, it's done, it was gone. So I told everybody, if you've got relatives in that direction, go, and we'll stay here and pray for anybody who might have been in harm's way. I get finished with that, and again, Father Shoby's watching the Weather Channel, and his eyes are about this big when I go over and he goes, Father, our hospital's gone. Well, of course, I'm thinking Rangeline, and I'm like, what do you mean our hospital's gone? And I look at the pictures, and it's like, whoa. So, again, we were in the same situation. We opened up the high school. We're headed to Memorial, and they're all running across the street. And I'm going, where's everybody going? Oh, we're going to this high school over here. Well, it was our high school, Macaulay. So we were in the midst of, again, being a hospital, which then we turned into a refugee center, and then a distribution center, and then we were a nursing home for a while. And we just kept evolving as the needs were. Again, we were off. We knew that life was going to be very different than it had ever been. And again, the same thing. We just kept sending crews out, to the people who could get through to go house to house and start looking to see whether they could find anybody who needed any assistance whatsoever. And so they just kept saying, what do we do, and just kept sending people out, again, to try to respond. It was it's still very surreal in terms of looking, thinking back on that night and the experiences that were there. One of the big moments for us at St. Peter's is in the people who died. Again, I found it very strange. 4% of the people who died, 4% Catholic population. We had 4 people. One was a professor at the university, and the other 3 were all in one family. It was a father and 2 kids, the Howards, Rusty and Harley and Hayes, and they had been with Edie, the mom, and they would have been over at McAllister's for dinner. She was on her way back to work. And they had a phone conversation about, you better take cover. The car is rocking and, rolling as I'm trying to get back to work. So get the kids to cover. Well, they stopped at Home Depot right as the tornado hit. They'd just gotten inside when the wall collapsed on them. And again, Harley and Hayes, little kids at that point in time, died in their dad's arms. And so, all of that was a blur. So you're trying to run this distribution center, but you're running over to their house. Right. And again, strange, you go into their neighborhood over in Webb City, and there's nothing touched. But yet those lives are gone. Right. And so it was just a matter of trying to help everybody pick up the pieces of what was going on. because she knew where they were. And, of course, everybody's saying that you can't go in there, you can't do those things. They knew the truck was still in the parking lot. He was a reservist, in National Guard, and so his Army friends were the ones who finally went in and made sure those kinds of things. But again, that was the death side of everything. That was the suffering side of everything. But there had to be new life. There had to be something that came from all of that. Not to negate the pain and the suffering, because the pain and the suffering is definitely a part of what occurred that night and in the subsequent days that followed. But what about the other side of that? What about the other side of it? To use, again, Christian terminology, the other side of the Paschal mystery, the resurrection side, and how those things, changed and happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many elements to that. I remember, probably a month after the tornado, a group coming in whose job was to support pastors through natural disasters and to offer a variety of things. And I remember them asking us, and there were probably 100 pastors from the area that attended a meal, and they were there to kind of just take care of us and offer themselves. And they asked, "What can we do for you?" And I remember those of us that were sitting in the room looking at each other, just, where do you begin? And so we said, well, there's one thing we don't need, and that was bottled water, because at that point
it kept multiplying on the bleachers at Macaulay, I'm here
like
to tell
tribbles.
you.
And so we, but we said, well, what can you do? And I think I learned that day that in the midst of a natural disaster, one of the things you can do is to articulate, this is what I need. And when people ask, to not feel any sense of indignity in saying, we need people, and we need money, and we need prayers.
Right.
And so I think if I were to say, in that resurrection and rebirth, it was the resources and the people and the prayers that we needed at that point.
Right. Well, we had, I remember even on the first night, the second night actually, people had brought all kinds of things. And I got very practiced at saying, don't bring us more stuff. Send a donation to your denomination or whatever, that you think will make sure that the money gets where it needs to go at the local level. But don't send more stuff, because we're drowning in stuff. I remember even with our own volunteers, everybody wanted to do something, and that night I was clearing out of one of the small, rooms that we were using to feed people out of over at the high school. One of those small rooms, and I was taking all the canned goods, and I was getting them out of there and taking them over to our outreach house, and then I was taking everything from the outreach house that was ready to eat, things that could just be opened up and have people eat. And people were my own volunteers were getting angry at me because I was giving away the food, and I'm like, people don't even have can openers. People can't open any of these things. So if they need canned food and that's what they're doing, we'll send them over to the outreach. But in the meantime, let's get all the stuff that we can, the people who are hungry, who are coming through the door now, that they can just open up and eat, and to do some of those things.
Yeah.
The initial things that we went through were so different than where we've landed now, 5 years later. And so in a minute, when we come back after the break, I want to talk a little bit about where we've landed now, at 5 years later. Where are we in this cycle, if you will, of recovery, 5 years in, and how can we kind of reframe that for ourselves, even as people of faith? How can we frame that for ourselves in a way that becomes for us something a little bit more hopeful on the flip side of that whole thing? So we'll talk about that right after we come back. This is Faith in Our Hometown.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Welcome back. My guest this morning is Aaron Brown, who's the pastor over at St. Paul's United Methodist. Aaron, thanks for joining us again this morning. We're talking about how do we reframe this as a different way of looking at things 5 years out 5 years out in this recovery period. I'll start off by telling you about Edie at this point in time. You know, Edie Howard, now Edie Housel, okay? Edie, just her biggest struggle in that whole thing was, why did my husband and my 2 kids, the whole family except for her, why did they die and why didn't I? Well, of course, there's no answer to that.
Right.
Okay. You know, because she wanted to. She was praying that for whatever reason, God would let her go be with her husband and her children.
I understand that.
And we all still feel their loss. You know, we all still talk about them. We all still, you know, have those moments where we'll be telling stories and doing those things. But 5 years out, you know, I got to tell you the rest of the story, okay? Because this is the flip side. This is the resurrection side. Not that the cross wasn't real. Not that the cross didn't hurt. But here's the resurrection side of this whole thing. Edie got very much closer to the guy that was the best man at their wedding. Same hometown, you know, from over in Kansas. But so Dusty and, Rusty and the 2 kids were, of course, killed in the tornado. Dusty, so this is always entertaining to even tell this part of the story. Dusty, who was the best man at their wedding, Dusty and Edie got very, very close in that because he'd lost his best friend and she'd lost her best friend. And they, you know, and they just got closer and closer during this whole thing. Well, eventually, you know, Edie was getting some counseling and everything, and they got closer and closer, and, you know, and finally they just thought, well, are we supposed to make a go of this together? And so, you know, and almost in medieval fashion, you know, Dusty steps in and says, I think maybe we should. Do you want to get married? Well, Edie again said, well, look, I've been through some counseling and some stuff, and I'm not getting in this thing unless you could do some of the same. You know, strong, silent type Dusty is. So at any rate, they both do their thing. They get together. We witness the marriage, and again, you know, sometimes the family was having trouble with all that, going, you know, how can you do this? But I mean, they'd been through what they'd been through, and were now making the next steps. They were finding the new life in the middle of all this death. And now they've got 2 beautiful kids, you know, cute as they can be. Now, in no way, shape, or form did those kids replace, you know, their half-brother and their half-sister. So they're not replacements for them. You know, Harley and Hayes were who they were, and when we lost them. Rusty was who he was, and we lost him. Edie lost all 3 of them. But now if you asked Edie if she now sees that there was some purpose in her staying here, she'd be able to articulate it and say, well, at least now I know why I'm still here. You know, I've got a husband who loves me, we've got 2 beautiful children, and we've got the others up in heaven, okay? But I at least now know why I was not there too. You know, and I'm sure she still has days when she wonders why she didn't go. But now she's experiencing all this in a completely different way. She's experiencing the resurrection side, the flip side of that. And that's where I would almost in some ways challenge our viewers to look at that part of the mystery too. Because that, you know, the other was definitely a part that we will always remember. It will always be a part. That suffering, loss, pain, death that we all went through is certainly still a part of our lives. But now you can see the resurrection, and they can see it, and Edie can see it in a completely different way than she could 5 years ago. And that's the part. And you've got a new church, you know, a new life in your congregation. How's all that played out for you?
Well, you know, it makes me think about some practical things like. Right after the tornado, I was invited by a group out of Minnesota to do a biking ride. They wanted to raise money for Joplin. So they're like, we don't know anybody in Joplin. We want to raise some money for Joplin. We need to have somebody come do a bicycle ride with us. And we wondered if you would do it. So they called me. They somehow just got my name. I wasn't a bicyclist at the time and had no idea what any of that meant. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm here in the middle of all this, with families that are in need, a church that needs to be rebuilt, a city that is, really struggling right now. And this was in August after the tornado. And they said, well, will you pray about it? And I'm like, well, no, I don't really need to do that. I did. And it was one of those things where, yeah, you do this, be a representative with this group. And so, I had 3 weeks to prepare for an 800-mile bicycle, not motorcycle, bicycle trip. So
800 miles?
800 miles. So we biked from Joplin to Atlanta. And on that journey, it was a chance for me to tell the story. I think there's a lot of healing for me in that process of being able to tell the story. And the world kind of saw what happened in Joplin, and for me, in some small way, to kind of thank people for what they had done for us without even knowing us. So, that actually ended at a conference in Atlanta where there were, I think, 15 or 20,000 people from around the world at a conference. And so myself and the other 11 cyclists rode onto the stage at this conference, having completed our 800-mile journey, and again told the story of why we were doing that, and to get that word out, to tell people, thank you for your help, and please keep helping us in Joplin. So the funds that we raised for that were really phenomenal for 12 people to raise about $50,000 that came back to Joplin. And then the next year there was a group of Joplin folks that saw that and said, how about we do that? It came through Rebuild Joplin. And so there were a group of folks that, they kind of asked me, how'd you do that? And I said, well, I just was a guest of a group, and so, connect the dots. And then that group formed. And so the next year we bicycled a group, pretty much just folks from Joplin and some other folks from around the country. But there were about 30 of us that went from Joplin to New Orleans to kind of connect the dots to Katrina and their needs still down there and our needs still here in Joplin. And we raised over $150,000 on that bicycle ride. And then from there we did a ride for Baxter Springs and Moore, Oklahoma, each subsequent year. But then last year the ride was more toward healing in other ways. It wasn't natural disaster related. It was to raise money for Lafayette House here in Joplin, and to rebuild a home, still home oriented, but to get some families affected by abuse into
domestic
a place,
violence,
domestic violence, into a place of safety, a home there. So I look at that as to say, natural disaster happened and there was horrible things, and we raised money to alleviate that, but now it has opened up the possibility of us raising money for all kinds of things. This year the group that's doing the cycling is going to raise money to help the YMCA with a bus that they need here locally. We're also raising money for Circles Out of Poverty this year to see how many families we can help through the Circles Out of Poverty program to get folks out of a welfare system and into a place of dignity, so that they are making those connections. So what can come out of something tragic? There is a resurrection, and there is hope, and there is rebuilding in lots of different ways, not just natural disaster stuff.
Yeah, and that's it's so hard when you're in the tomb or on the cross or whichever language you want to use. It's so hard to see that kind of thing, and you can't take people there. I would have never, I would never been looking at people on the night of the tornado saying, just wait for the resurrection. It'll come. That wasn't where we were. Yeah. That wasn't our experience at that moment.
Yeah. And you can't map your way out of it.
Nope.
You can't say, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, and this is going to happen, and this is going to be good, and we'll no. I remember that night looking from my vantage point there at 26th in Monroe and thinking, I'm pretty sure the whole city's gone.
Yeah.
And to see the fires that were burning and think, I've never seen anything like this in my life.
It was like Armageddon.
I don't think there's going to be a city here anymore. And so what does that mean for a church? What does it mean for people with careers and jobs? And and how many, looking across the city, I thought, how many thousands of people are buried in this? And so to go from that, you can't be in the middle of that and say, okay, we're going to do these steps and get our way out.
And here I am trapped with everybody, coming to us, looking for help. And I'm trapped there. I didn't even see any damage except in those people that were being evacuated from hospitals and things like that. I didn't see any of that damage until the next day. Because of where I was, my perspective. So all I was like, okay, we're here, we're in one piece. Now what do we do for all these people who are not in one piece? Yeah. And so again, those perspectives are just so unusual for all of us, because we're all limited by our own experience and our own perspectives.
Right.
And that's again what I guess that's my hope and prayer. During this time, now that we're 5 years out, is to say, can we can we recapture, can we reclaim some of that post perspective rather than, because I don't want to be thought of. I mean, sometimes I get so tired of talking about the tornado. To me, these days it's much more exciting to talk about the way Joplin has grown since the tornado, the way that we've recovered. The way that in some ways the city is stronger than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think for me it's important for both. When people ask me, if somebody says, "Oh, you're from Joplin, didn't you guys have?" and if they know something and they want to tease that out and talk about that, I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about my experience of that, and I want to, because it's such a big part now of who I am. It's woven into my character and nature and existence. But I also do want to talk about the moments of rebuilding and the celebration that happened in me every time a business opened up.
Right.
It's like, wow, there's one more sign.
Yeah.
There's
or
one more
when,
sign
still, I still get excited when I see more houses. In the
zone,
strike zone. When I see more houses, it excites me. I mean, just to see all those things.
Right. When the high school opened up, that was a big deal. When the hospital opened up,
Yep,
it was kind of the hospital and the high school, the last two big projects in our city
right.
that
Yep.
and I
But
know we have the
got
park
there.
under construction now,
Sure.
and good things happening there. But
Well, we are. We'll be right back after this Mercy Minute to wrap up.
Hi, I'm Angie Saporito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Stephen Meyer, cardiovascular surgeon with Mercy. Hi, Dr. Meyer. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So we've talked a little bit about the vein clinic, and what is that exactly?
That is minimally invasive treatment for people with varicose veins.
So, and it's an outpatient procedure, right?
Those are outpatient procedures, and it's all done in the office under local or just no anesthesia at all.
So could varicose veins, could that be something that's hazardous to your health?
Many people worry. They come in and ask about could their varicose veins lead to pulmonary embolism or things like that. Typically they do not, but they can lead to secondary effects such as pain, local irritation, swelling, ulcers, things like that.
So if you have a concern or you'd like to get that taken care of, you can call the number on your screen. It'll be easy to get right in, visit with your physician, and we'll be happy to see you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning for Faith in Our Hometown. We've been talking about the date, May 22nd, and we can think about where we are today versus where we were 5 years ago. There is no doubt that 5 years ago, we were in the midst of some of the greatest pain and the suffering that we as a city have ever experienced. And many of us in the midst of pain and suffering for personal lives and people that we knew and people that we loved. That will always be a part of our lives. But we also have the perspective today that says we're in a completely different place than we were 5 years ago. There have been signs of new life. There have been signs of resurrection. There have been signs that that wasn't the end and that wasn't the final truth for us, that the truth continues to unfold. And so we've got both sides of a coin. And that is the way that our lives are. We've got the good and the bad. We're in a different place than we were 5 years ago. So thanks for joining us for Faith in Our Hometown this morning.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. here on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.